She broke not one, but two of the biggest stories on the planet this week. And no, I'm not talking about using the Department of Justice as against a political rival of President Biden. I'm not talking about the indictment of former President Donald Trump. I'm not talking about Canadian wildfires and smoke in U.S. cities. And I am not talking about the merger of the PGA Tour and Live Golf. I'm talking about something else. Two things, actually, that you did not hear much about. Got pushed to the side. Margot Cleveland is a lawyer and a graduate of highest honors from Notre Dame Law School. She served 25 years as a permanent law clerk for the federal appellate judge on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. She is an amazing journalist in the true sense of the word. And she digs and she researches and she finds details and questions things and she reports honestly. Imagine that. But she has an opinion as well. You can find her work at thefederalist.com. You can follow her on Twitter at Prof. MJ Cleveland, at Prof. MJ Cleveland. Margot broke the story that has received very little traction so far, so we thought we'd invite her here. In fact, it was buried in the press because hours after she broke it, an indictment was announced. I'm sure you heard about that. Good evening, Margot Cleveland. Thank you very much for joining us on WCBM here in Baltimore.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Kevin.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. We are on the air in Baltimore, and your story involves a member of Congress from Maryland, Jamie Raskin, in a roundabout way. It also involves the head of the FBI, which wants a new headquarters built here in Maryland. Can you walk us through the news that you broke earlier this week of a sitting U.S. president and a $5 million bribe and a confidential human source?
Like you said, the media seems to be uninterested in this. They're focusing on documents as opposed to the donation, so to speak, to the Biden family. And what we have here is a confidential human source who was highly regarded, highly credible, who had worked under the Obama administration. He came to the FBI in 2017, we're starting to learn. And in 2020, they interviewed him, and he gave a detailed, 5 single-spaced pages, detailed summary of allegations that Biden had been paid $5 million by the owner of Burisma. And this confidential human source didn't get this through the grapevine. He got it directly from the Burisma president, the Burisma founder, who said that, oh yeah, don't worry, we've got ways to hide this money, basically. He said it's going to take people 10 years to figure out how we got the money to Biden. And it was to pay Biden to get the prosecutor fired who was investigating Burisma. So this is a huge story. And not only has the media not covered the story, but they haven't covered the cover-up of this huge story.
So this is Burisma Holdings, the same company, the Ukrainian energy company, that put Hunter Biden, the son of the president, on their board overseeing their legal department. Hunter Biden was overseeing their legal department. I think he was put on the board in 2014, May of 2014, according to government records. And he sat on that board while Viktor Shokin was investigating the corruption with Burisma and the Ukrainian government. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's absolutely accurate.
And Viktor Shokin was the gentleman who President Biden famously was quoted as saying, we're going to withhold your $1 billion unless you get rid of that prosecutor who's learning a little too much.
Right, except for he didn't mention that part about learning too much. Although he did seem to have no problem going on tape talking about how he threatened the Ukrainians to withhold money that was supposed to go and help the Ukrainians unless they fired the prosecutor who was looking into Burisma's corruption. And what does Biden say? He says something like, and well, what happened? He got fired. And I can't even remember the jargon that Biden used, but it worked.
Yeah.
And
I have the clip. I will play it a little bit later. I watched that. I went back this morning and watched that entire 1 hour presentation from the Council on Foreign Relations in 2018, where President Biden, then former vice president, was speaking. And you'll be shocked at what he talks about.
And, you know, the timing of that's rather interesting because you said 2018. So what that means is that then the former vice president is out of the office, and he's talking about something he did in office. Mm-hmm. But we now know from what the oversight committees are saying, that this confidential human source first mentioned this in 2017. So Biden has no way of knowing that there's a confidential human source who knows about the $5 million payout. But at the same time, the confidential human source doesn't have this kind of open source reporting that Christopher Steele used. The confidential human source making this allegation about this payout going back to 2017 had no other basis to come up with it other than him having contacts, him having sources. And then 2020 is where we get the details, the 5 pages of details going through it. So that's a huge scandal, but that's only a glimmer of the scandal. The rest of it is the cover-up of that. Because what happened is the confidential human source comes forward, and it was reviewed out of the Pittsburgh office. And this is where your listeners kind of have to think back.
Yeah, this is Scott Brady, who I've met and interviewed when I was on the air in Pittsburgh. Scott Brady was the former U.S. Attorney for Western Pennsylvania.
Right. And before the 2020 election, Rudy Giuliani had gotten some info from Ukraine and was putting it out there. And then Attorney General William Barr was very prudent about this. He said, look, we can't trust anything coming from Ukraine. He had Scott Brady go through and basically sift through to see what in here has a basis for being investigated versus what is obviously just something being thrown to the wall. And one of the things that you're seeing Democrats do is they're trying to say that this confidential human source was part of the Rudy Giuliani intel, and it wasn't. I have sources who have said it had nothing to do with the Rudy info. So that went to Brady, and then what happened from there was it was given to Delaware to look into further. But at the same time, we now know from the House Oversight Committee that somehow FBI headquarters decided to do some sort of an assessment. And we don't know what this assessment was, but somehow this assessment pulled in that document that the confidential human source did. And they said this is disinformation, and they closed it out. But that was not at all, and this is coming from Attorney General Barr. He said, no, we didn't close out that confidential human source in that reporting. We sent it to Delaware.
And Delaware closed it out.
And, well, we don't know about that. That's the part that we don't know, and I don't have any sources telling me on this, on what happened with Delaware.
So this confidential sources paper, what's that, the FD 1023, the 5 pages, gets sort of brushed under the table and put in a box and put in a file, and it's disappeared from anybody seeing it. Right.
So this is what we do know. We know that headquarters had called it disinformation, and that according to the releases from the oversight committees, they had marked it in a sub-file in a way that only allowed the agents who had compiled it to access. But we also know that it was referred to Delaware for further investigation. So what we don't know is, did Delaware actually get the document, or did they get a report or a letter referring to the document? Did they then try to look at it and they weren't able to access it, or they saw that FBI headquarters said it was disinformation, so they did nothing further? So we know basically what happened in Pittsburgh, and we know basically what happened in headquarters. What we don't know is what happened in Delaware. And that's another huge red flag of, okay, nothing has come out of Delaware. And they have been investigating Hunter Biden for, 5 years, including a pretty straightforward gun charge and pretty straightforward failure to file income tax charge. But nothing has come out of there. So that's another avenue that we don't know why or what is going on there.
We're speaking with Margot Cleveland. She is a journalist with the Federalist, Federalist.com. She broke the biggest story in the country that got very little media attention. That's a $5 million alleged bribe from Burisma Holdings president to the President of the United States, who was, well, at the time, the Vice President of the United States. This form, this FD 1023 form, Democrats are rallying around the fact that it went nowhere, I guess, and that the person looking into it was a Trump appointee. Is that accurate? And is that how Jamie Raskin of Maryland is involved?
Well, that's how the Democrats are portraying it. And my understanding of Scott Brady was a Trump appointee.
Yes.
And he had been tasked with looking into it. But that's as far as the truth goes from what the Democrats are saying. And here, we don't have to trust individuals familiar with the investigation. We have William Barr going on the record twice. He went on the record first with me when he said that it's not true, it wasn't closed down, it was sent to Delaware for further investigation. And then, after that, Raskin came out, issued a press release, and said, I stand by my statement. And if Barr has any bones, it's with the Pittsburgh U.S. Attorney. Then Barr came out again, and I'm not sure who he spoke with first, but I saw it in the New York Post, where he said Raskin is confused on what Brady's role was. And this is where I was trying to set up the scene, that Barr gave this to Brady as a kind of sniff test. Is this stuff that needs to go further, or is this stuff that you can close out? And what Brady said is, this passes the sniff test, this goes to Delaware. And you have to remember, Delaware already had a money laundering investigation going on since 2018. We're talking in 2020. So it makes sense that Pittsburgh doesn't do this investigation. It has an investigation going on. So the Democrats and Raskin saying, oh, no, that nothing came of it because there was nothing there, Trump's guy said that, 100% false. And we have the former Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, saying it. And you can't put Barr down as being some mega Trump supporter. He has no qualms saying something when he disagrees with Trump. And he is speaking outright that this is not what happened. This wasn't closed down. But I want to just take it a step further. We have the Attorney General saying that's not true. And Raskin and his ilk are continuing to back it up. It's like, fine, let's find out what happened then. Have the whatever was sent to Delaware. There had to have been some sort of report. So, let's find out what happened here. When the Attorney General out of Pittsburgh, when he finished his review, I'm sure he probably did close down his review. But was there something further that was sent to Delaware? And if so, let's see it. I have no bones or no qualms that who's telling the truth here between the two sides. Mm-hmm. So I think that the Democrats' attempt to spin here is going to backfire.
Well, it'll backfire, especially if we actually see the FD 1023 or the identity of the confidential human source who worked for the federal government for several years and was paid around $200,000 from what I read for his efforts, right. Her efforts, who knows. If that person is revealed, then we would know. Have you seen or talked to anybody who has seen that 1023 form?
I have not seen that form, so I don't know who has seen that form. Obviously, we've heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has. And
she was very specific.
Yeah, she was. And I am trying to get some more details because my thought is if she's out there talking about it, why isn't everyone out there talking about it so that we know what's in there? But I also want to point out here is I'm not so much concerned about what is in the form. I'm concerned about what the FBI did once they had that form. Did they follow the leads that FBI would normally follow when they have a confidential human source saying that a high-level government official received a bribe and that came from a highly credible, long-term confidential human source? Because as I've said before, our country can survive the Bidens not receiving justice, but our country can't survive the FBI taking the role of deciding whether or not to investigate a politician. And we're seeing that with Trump right now. This is so outrageous, the way they went 100% after Trump over documents, and they basically ignored a highly regarded confidential human source saying the then vice president took $5 million for policy decisions, and we have Biden on tape talking about firing or threatening the Ukrainians unless they fired the prosecutor, which was what the whole purpose of the bribe was for.
And the confidential human source, the highly reliable confidential human source, said this on record and recorded the 5-page document well over a year before the president said what he said to the Council of Foreign Relations about withholding money. And
well, actually,
well
there are
before
two different ones. So he first mentioned it in 2017. The 5-page detailed document came in 2020. So it was after Biden made that comment, but it was first mentioned in 2017 before Biden made that comment. But from what the Oversight Committee is saying is he had specific details. He knew how it was managed. So it wasn't just a matter of, oh, yeah, he threatened to fire him. It was they were to buy a oil and gas company in, I can't remember if it was America or North America.
Yeah, it was the United States, yes.
Yeah, so the confidential human source went through with very detailed specifics, which, according to Congressman Commerce, matches exactly what the Biden family did with another country. So it's kind of the same MO, the same modus operandi, where they kind of filter their bribes through the same kind of web of corporations. So we have some more evidence to help corroborate that what the confidential human source says flies.
So the specifics are there. Members of Congress are able to read part of it now in their SCIF. We don't think we'll see this document, but what are the chances anything's actually done with these allegations from the president of Burisma Holdings saying that, yeah, well, we spent $5 million paying off somebody who happens to be now the president of the United States?
Right. So first, I'd have to know what the statute of limitations is on this kind of money laundering. I'm not sure. I want to say it's 10 years, so I think we'd still be in that time frame. But this Delaware U.S. attorney who's looking into this stuff has been looking into it for a very long time. One of the things I wonder is now that it's getting some publicity, will he start taking that document, the FD 1023, more seriously? But then you also have to say, is Garland going to let him? Because we have whistleblowers who have been saying that the Department of Justice has limited what type of investigation that the Delaware U.S. Attorney can do to prevent it from implicating President Biden. So whether anything comes of it is anyone's guess.
Do you feel that keeping the source of the FD 1023 document, the 5-page document, keeping that person anonymous is safe or not? I feel that that person should come forward and have their name announced in order to make sure that they're safe.
At this point, I would think the guys who did this cover-up know who it is. I mean, how many people would have known about the existence of that document? It had to have been very few. So I have a feeling that the bad guys within the bureaucracy know who the whistleblower is, but once the whistleblower's name is out, they're going to be charged by everyone from media to harassers, and so I can understand why the whistleblower doesn't want to come out, and I think maybe it's more prudent for the whistleblower to maintain his anonymity until we have more detail. And I actually do think that we're going to end up seeing the 1023. I think that the confidential human source's name will be redacted and maybe a little bit more detail as well. But I think that there's a lot more that should happen before we find out who the whistleblower is.
Do you think that this will this gain traction for the 2024 presidential election, and will it force the president, Biden, to maybe make a change and not run for re-election?
I don't think it will change Biden. What will change Biden is if the people who are pulling the strings say, we are going to start coming out against you unless you drop out. All you need to do is your doctor's advice. I mean, he is an easy cop-out that, my doctor has advised me that it wouldn't be in my best interest to run. I'm actually kind of surprised that the Democrats have not put it to Biden that way yet.
Yeah, I am too. He's had 2 aneurysms and he's got a severe arthritis in his spine. I mean, he's got several outs health-wise.
Right. I'm surprised that they haven't taken him to the side and said, the next leak's coming from us, and it's going to be this 1023, and it's going to be something about Hunter, and it's going to be something that you did that, no one knows about, but we do. Yeah. So I think that it's not going to be Biden feeling the pressure because of the scandal. It's going to be Biden feeling the pressure when Democrats decide they care enough. But the problem is we don't have a press that cares anymore.
Right.
And that the mainstream press, for the most part, has been ignoring this scandal. And you're going to see it now with Trump. They're going to try to pretend that this is Trump trying to take the focus off of himself. So I think that it really is going to depend on the Democrats and whether or not they think they can prop him up for another election or not.
Margot Cleveland, she writes for thefederalist.com. You can find her at Prof. MJ Cleveland on Twitter, at Prof. MJ Cleveland on Twitter. Again, she had the biggest story that got very little press, and that was the allegations of a $5 million bribe that was accepted by the now President of the United States. Margot, thank you so much for your insight.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It was a pleasure.